Hi there. Okay, so I'm gonna take a gander at your question here. Um so I am I'm not a registered nurse. I'm a nursing student too, so just obviously don't infuse this into a patient on my advice, please. um but I have seen this question a lot of times. So basically we've got an amount of an infusion and we've got a time, and we're trying to figure out how much we're giving in milliliters per hour. And so the situation is we have this 17-year-old girl, this patient who is admitted, she's being admitted to a medical unit from a surgical unit after breaking her wrist. She's recovering from breaking her wrist, and while she's recovering, she gets this upper respiratory sort of something going on. She's got pneumonia or something that's causing her to cough and have a fever. So it's going from she's recovering to now she has this medical problem. And then also she broke her dominant hand and she's type 1 diabetic, so she might, obviously need some kind of help with administering her insulin while she's sick. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with this problem so much, except that she's getting potassium chloride. And I'd be curious to know a little more about her labs and stuff because, a lot of times you see potassium given to patients who are in DKA. That can really throw people's potassium off. When they are in DKA, they'll have super high potassium, and then insulin actually brings potassium into the cells, and so then they're, it'll start out high, and then it'll plummet. But this person's A1C was like, I don't know, what did it say, 46 or 45 or something like that. And her last blood glucose was like 7. I'm working out of America, where we actually do it in milligrams per deciliter and percentages. So her A1C is like a 6.3%. And her blood glucose, her last one, was like 126 or something. So it actually looks like she's got her diabetes under control. So they might just be resuscitating fluid, or they might, her potassium might be low after her surgery or after her illness, or we don't really know from the question. But that'll give us a good idea of what's going on, so we can check that what we get, our answer, makes sense in the situation. So this ends up actually being super, super straightforward. We've got this bag of normal saline, right? Normal saline is just, what they call 0.9% NS. And it's 500 milliliters. And then in that 500 milliliter bag of normal saline is 10 millimoles of KCl, potassium chloride, 10 millimoles of potassium chloride. So something interesting to note here is that this is not a concentration. A concentration is like how strong is it, right? If we put the volume, maybe this is me becoming too technical here, but if we had 10 millimoles per 500 milliliters, that would be a concentration. If we had 10 millimoles here, the same 10 millimoles, but we cut this in half, and we only had 250 milliliters, the concentration, it would be twice as strong. So, just for what it's worth, if it helps picture it. I'm a big believer in drawing out the details, so let's get rid of that. And then we know that we're infusing this whole bag. Some doctor somewhere said, okay, we want this whole amount, 500 milliliters of this stuff, infused over 8 hours, right? So all we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, if we cut this bag, right, theoretically, cut it into 8 pieces, how big are those pieces going to be, right? So this is going to infuse in 1 hour. And then this is going to infuse in 1 hour. And then this is going to infuse in 1 hour. And we're trying to figure out how many milliliters are going to drip down here per hour. How many, we know how long it's going to take. It's going to take 8 hours, but how much volume is going to go down each hour so that after 8 hours has passed, we don't have any left. So hopefully that helps to visualize it. And then it becomes so simple. 500 milliliters total, infused over 8 hours. It's basically like if we're saying, if we have, this 500, we have 500 pieces of candy and we're dividing it between 8 people, right? How many pieces of candy is each person going to get? It's the same sort of math. So 500 milliliters over 8 hours. If I punch that in my calculator here, I get 62.5. And then my units are just going to be milliliters per hour. It's kind of messy, but and then make sure that you know your rounding rules. Some instructors will be really picky and say, okay, if it's in milliliters per hour, if it's a flow rate, you have to round up or down. So this might end up being 63 milliliters per hour. Right? If we were doing this in 4 hours, we would end up getting twice as much, right? Because we're infusing the same amount in half the time. So if you don't believe me, let's say we're doing 500 milliliters, we're infusing the same bag, 500 milliliters, in 4 hours. If we divide that out on a calculator, we get 125 milliliters per hour. Twice as much as this, right? And so this should be your answer here. And then if it might help to understand one more thing, we can look at, okay, is this a safe infusion rate? How much potassium is she actually getting? So 500 milliliters, if we're infusing this whole bag, how much KCl is in that bag? We're infusing the full bag, we're infusing the full amount of potassium chloride. So we're ending up infusing 10 millimoles, right? And then we can say, okay, how many millimoles of potassium is it safe for a person to get? So, 10 millimoles of KCl, right? Potassium chloride per 8 hours. And we can divide that out and we can say, okay, 10 divided by 8 is 1.25 millimoles per hour. And then in that whole time, we could say, okay, if we're giving this much in 8 hours, we would just multiply that back by 8, and we'd say, okay, she's getting 10 millimoles. And somewhere, you can look on, the resource we use here is called Micromedics. I don't know if you guys use the same thing, but somewhere you can find something that says, okay, this is a safe amount of potassium chloride to be getting, right? Yeah, I hope that's helpful.